Cool. So thanks everyone for making it to the Piral Community Stand-Up. I guess number 6. This time we have only, let's say, 2 demos, but I think 2 very interesting ones. But before we dive into the demos, let's first have a quick look at the current progress. What we did is that we released a new patch for the 0.12 version last week. It was only small things. The most important ones were that the bundle script that I'm about to demo is now in there already, fully tested, should work. And as we will see, this highly depends, of course, on the backend implementation, but front-end side covered. And besides some further enhancements on the documentation page, we got a patch out for the Piral OIDC plugin, which now allows setting and retrieving a state during sign-in redirects and callbacks, which is quite nice because that allows you in the end to, well, place in, for instance, additional security information or information that you could use to make then actions afterwards, such as redirection. So when you started, let's say, with a sub route and then you had a login flow in between, you can then navigate back to that route and you place the user where the user actually wanted to be, which is quite nice. And beforehand, that required a little bit of work and potentially a solution like storing it in a session or local storage. All right, so what's left for the 1.0.0? Still, of course, some documentation work on cosmetic things like the introduction video. But one of the things we will heavily invest in is Piral Blazor, which I think is quite awesome so far, but is of course still more proof of concept and a preview work, and we will now place that on a level where we say, oh, this is actually as we want it to be. And I'm there also in touch with the community members who want to contribute. So any contribution, as always, much appreciated. Other than that, I think we have on Webpack 5 potential release date, which is mid of October somehow. So if that really holds true, then we will upgrade and use Webpack 5 for the Piral CLI Webpack. And we will also put that in our time frame. So when this is really met, we will coordinate our version 1 release with Webpack 5 actually. And again, and this is or will potentially be one of the things why 1.0.0 could be delayed. React 17, we still want to have that in there. But other than that, no real progress on the items you see there so far. I mean, it's all progressing somehow, but nothing closed besides documentation work. If there are any questions to the current open items, some closed ones, or in general schedule and plan, then feel free to interrupt, ask a question. Otherwise, I would say let's have a brief demo. I want to start with what was announced last week to demo, the bundle script. And for this, let's have a look at the issue first. I know we touched it last week, but just to give a common ground. So what was introduced is a new kind of metadata transport for an entry. So we have the version 1, we have the version 0, of course, beforehand. We have, if you want to, anything custom. And now we introduce another specified metadata entry, and that is the so-called metadata bundle, which has a prop called bundle, and that's it. Otherwise, it still links to some script. And what it allows you to do is, if you know already there's a bundle generated on your backend, you could skip the metadata request at all, and you just fake it. You just say, oh, this is, by the way, where I already know my only entry sits. And that way you more or less directly bring in another script. You can even prefetch or preload it. and yeah, it will be very fast in loading time. There are some problems with that. They're all discussed here, but I would say let's have a look how that thing may be leveraged. So first, I have an app shell created. Actually, it's I think the one we used last time. And the nice thing is that I can now do exactly what I just said. I can go directly to the backend and call it. Or alternatively, I could still do my dance with the backend and first get the metadata response. This one, of course, has the advantage that it's not hard-coded. It could be mixed up, could be hybrid, it could evolve, and so I'm not stuck here. So let's start maybe with this version. Let's run this code. And I also have a feed service running. Actually, it's a sample pilot service here. And this one at the moment, I guess, is empty. So let's have a look. So there is nothing in there. See if the app shell already loaded. Still ongoing, so let's give it a second on my partially slower machine. Okay, there it is. So here's our hello world, and well, since it's empty, well, it's empty, right? So nothing transported here. But let's already open the network tab. Now we want to populate that a bit, so let's just run in one of the pilots here, just pilot 1. Let's just run publish pilot, which publishes to this local feed service one pilot. Now we see there is a pilot 1, and well, it just is there. And if we now run this, then the pilot is here. Okay, so this thing is the, let's say, existing world. Right, so you get one pilot and you have it here. Let's publish a second one. Let's see. So let's give it a moment. But the same thing is happening. I'm publishing this to our local feed service. And then I'm equipped with 2 pilots. So again, waiting time. Okay, it was built and published. So now we see here there is a pilot 1, but we also see, of course, there's the pilot converter demo. Now, in my app shell, I got the 2 things. I got here this tile, I'm red, and here another tile, and they are coming from two different locations. So right now, it's actually using already a different URL. But first, let's start maybe with the original URL. Again, I'm red, I'm at the svelte one here. And we see we got the request as expected with 2 pilots. We got index.js here, index.js there. So we got a couple of requests. So overall, these are 3 requests, and 2 of them are depending on this one. So yeah, it could have a performance impact after all. Now, I mean, I already spoiled it, but nevertheless, there is, in this implementation that I have here, a special endpoint called bundle, which bundles all the available pilots, just gives me one URL here, and that's it. So if I use this one, swap to it, I see I only get the 2 requests, one bundle.js, one metadata request. But it's the same result, right? So this one even loads with some CSS. And the other one is also still fully functional. And I mean, to really make this quite nice, why do I need this metadata in this endpoint here? It's known anyway already where this sits. And so I can also say, oh, don't even go to the network, just get it from this URL. And so the result is that I directly now can start fetching this JavaScript here that's generated on the backend, and I don't even have the metadata response in between. So most likely best performance. However, of course, there are some pitfalls. So caching is not so easy here. Anyway, we always need to hit the server side. We can, of course, avoid all the transport via something like e-tags, but nevertheless, we don't know if that changed. And so we always need to at least touch the backend. And of course, especially in scenarios where we have a lot of pilots, but only one changed, we always need to load the most likely bigger or quite large bundle.js, which could, of course, have downsides. But that at the end of the day, you can always mix things up here. So that's how this bundling works. We will describe it in our spec for the 1.0.0 so soon, but this feature will not be part, of course, of our sample pilot service, and it will also not be part of the free community edition. So if you want to have it, you either follow the spec in implementing it, or you can, of course, always ask us for a premium subscription or trial on that one, right? And by the way, we also, of course, have things like a Docker image for a premium feed service, so you can license that as well. Anyway, so that's how this bundle mode works. Any questions on this one? Because if not, I would just continue and talk about a new utility package. And motivate that to you. So we introduce a new utility package. We call it the piral-debug-utils. It's a very simple package so far. It only comes with two functions. One function is called install piral-debug. And the other function is called with emulator pilots. Usually, so meaning like in the 99% use case, you will never see that. So the question, of course, is what is this package good for? Now, why you will not see it is quite easy, because the package is already a dependency of Piral Core. If you ever looked at the internals of Piral Core, you will notice that in our helpers here, we have an option creator, pretty much just converts the options on the outside API to options that we can then utilize internally when talking to Piral base. What we did here is that we distinguish certain cases. So we guard it against, for instance, if we are in a debug mode, or if we are currently having the emulator on. So debug pilot is only active if we are in emulator mode, and debug piral is active if we are developing a piral instance or a pilot. So that being said, there were these sections in there, and the problem with that was that if you were not relying on Piral Core, but for some reason you were relying on Piral base, which can make perfect sense, right? So for instance, if you don't want to use React, but something else, but the ecosystem that Piral created, you still want to leverage, or you are on React, but you don't like some of our choices in Piral Core, for instance, the additional API with register page, or also things like how we implemented extensions. Additionally, the state container that is used by Piral Core. If you didn't like any of that, you may have gone for Piral base and have recreated some of the things from Piral Core. And that's fully legit. But the problem, of course, with this approach is that you don't get things like the debugging tools, right? That now you can, with the piral-debug-utils, all you need is to have Piral base, and then in your own app shell based on Piral base or your own framework, maybe you just also depend on piral-debug-utils, and you then decide what to do. So in a nutshell, for us, it's just an abstraction that was created that helps you to gain flexibility. Again, most users will not need this. Most likely, we will also add there more options, such that you could even decide then or fine-tune how the debugging tools are used. So one of the use cases that directly comes up is if you're relying on Piral Core and you haven't, well, for good reason, haven't had any touch point with the debug utils right now, but for some reason in some environment, even though it's a production build, right? It's not a production environment. You still want to leverage for your devs, I don't know, the debug possibilities. Well, this is your chance now, because now you could just also be dependent on piral-debug-utils, and you can then decide that if, for instance, in your code you write something like if process env node env is not, or let's maybe give it a better name here, target env is not prod, or whatever you call your environments, you can still do some of these injections. So maybe, of course, in order to avoid duplicates, you would also say only if it's a production build, but your target environment is not your prod environment, then maybe do something like change your request pilot function or install piral-debug as an helper. And there you go. Then your developers or engineers can have access to the debugging tools in the browser, in that environment, on the live site, which is quite nice and gives you all that freedom to decide now and bring in the debugging tools when you want. In addition, of course, to the choices already made by Piral Core. But yeah, that's an immediate use case that we see that could be leveraged. Other than that, of course, we are always happy to hear where you find this quite helpful. At least we already have some use cases in mind. Any questions to this one? That is more an abstract thing, of course, but in combination, especially with the Piral Inspector, the browser extension there, I think it's a very useful thing to be flexible here. Okay, if not, any other questions or remarks? Cool. Okay, then I would say let's close the session for today. Always happy to answer any questions that come up on the Gitter chat, and here maybe then next week.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing the details. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.